Hello, and welcome to the SQV Conversation. I'm your host, Shannon Joy McKeel, and with me today, I have a dear, dear friend, Sasha Nelson from Moffat County, Colorado, little town that I'm pretty familiar with. It's where I was raised, called Craig, Colorado. And Sasha is an influencer, a change maker, a community builder, and she is a connector for those essential one-on-one relationships that make that region so transformative and great. Sasha is a friend from over probably 35 years we've known each other, and she has been a recent collaborator on some really powerful projects that we are working on. So it is my pleasure to introduce you to my dear friend, Sasha Nelson.
Hi, Shannon. Thanks for having me join you today.
Awesome. Well, it's our pleasure to get to know you. You are the first person from my roots that I've reached out to do an SQV, and I really appreciate you taking the time out of your very busy schedule to just, chat with us and have some fun.
Oh, well, you're making me feel like a little bit of a superstar. And speaking of a superstar, congratulations on the new book.
Thank you. Thank you. Nobody's really going to make money off of a self-published book, but I have some pretty powerful concepts in there. So it was my goal because I was raised in a small town by coal miners and dirt farmers. They said, they told me, if you're gonna complain about a problem, then you've got to also come up with a solution. So I spent the better part of last year writing down the maladies that I had experienced throughout my corporate and professional and personal life, and trying to figure out ways that I could offer solutions. So if people are experiencing the same types of issues, that they would have an opportunity to, maybe use some of those resources. Because believe it or not, when you start researching it, I know this is true because you're a researcher like me. When you start researching people's, these issues that are happening, there's communities and people that have experienced the same thing. And sometimes big organizations have even spent money to do studies on this stuff. So that's what is so charming and wonderful about what you do for our hometown and the surrounding region. You're bringing in collaborative efforts and using wisdom and research and other people to make the area better. So I cannot wait to learn about what you've been doing. We haven't talked in like 6 months, so tell us what you're doing.
I know it's been kind of a wild ride, really, the last couple of years. But you lean in, you hang on, you roll up your sleeves, you do what you can, and it's rarely about me. So I do appreciate the spotlight on me, but I want to really talk about how rural communities are moving forward. Ours is not the only one that is facing massive struggles, and the root cause of most of those struggles is a lack of investment and care for decades now, perhaps even a generation. And over that long term, we've had generational shift. So in our experience, we went to grade school and middle school and high school together. We were in that same mix. And I don't know if you recall, but in my family, it was really important that I do two things. I leave Craig because to be successful, I shouldn't be staying in Craig, Colorado. And two, that I also needed to not be like they were. So I'm the first person in my family to have gone on to college, the first person to have graduated college, have 4 university degrees now for my name. But we didn't really know what that meant. So in hindsight, we could have maybe thought through, what does college mean? What does it represent? What does it get you? Why should you be doing it? How do you choose your path? All of those things that I now know, right? But we didn't know then. We just knew we needed to break the cycle. And for women in my family, that meant instead of choosing to follow their hearts, get married young, make a lot of personal mistakes or choices that maybe in hindsight were again, leading from the heart, instead to be rational, to follow a career path, and for that to look something more ambitious. And I think in reality, I'm not alone, that there are many women in families who were encouraged to take a different path. And in hindsight, I think that results in a lot of opportunities. It also, in my world, didn't result in a lot of balance. So I'm very much a career person. I didn't have kiddos. I really spend my energy and my time creating legacy for my community, and that's very, very important to me. I did break a lot of those cycles, so that's been super exciting, and my family is really proud of where I am. But again, without having kiddos to create and build legacy with, for me and my husband as well, it's really important that we put our time and energy back into our community. And so we do that in multiple ways. We've done that for multiple ways since we were really young things. But I have to tell you, part of this story for me was that twice in my life, I felt the need to come back to Craig, Colorado. And the first time, it wasn't quite as difficult. It was still rough. The Internet of Things was really taking root. I was at least allowed to digitally reconnect with my community out there in the wider world, and they were my lifeline. And I knew I was still going places. I was going to leap off into grad school. And so that was, I just knew I was coming home for only a little while, and that was good. And I was able to really do some marvelous things here. In fact, I was able to become an executive director for the first time, twice over, help to raise and develop the funds for a community center called the Center of Craig, and then leap across the road and help with the project to secure the gunfighter collection for the Museum of Northwest Colorado. These are both legacy items that live and breathe and function and provide people venues for amazing celebrations. And it's just, I'm so incredibly humbled that I got to be part of that work at such a young age in my professional career and development. And then I went to grad school and I left the entire hemisphere and went to Australia. Never thought I would come back, certainly not to Craig. 3 months in, I essentially injured my back in such a dramatic fashion that I had chronic pain issues and lots of struggle for the next 7 years, and eventually came home to heal. I needed a safe space, the support of my family, the wider community, good doctors, et cetera. And fortunately, all of that played out well and in my benefit. But um, at that point, coming back broken was really difficult. I felt like an absolute failure. I struggled with that for several years, if I'm honest, trying to figure out who this person I didn't imagine becoming was, recovering my health, figuring out the financial picture, trying to navigate, a culture I hadn't been a part of in a very long time, um, and balancing, personal and professional in a very rural community that was facing its own struggles and challenges. So that kind of brings us up to now. And in the last few years, needless to say, I found my footing. I started to begin to realize that it's really important for rural communities for some of us to come back. Really important. Because what we bring is the knowledge of the traditions and the legacy and the history for each community, but we also bring new, fresh insight, ideas, innovations, and there can be friction as a result of that, but it's also very, very necessary for our rural communities to thrive and to move forward. And as we've recognized that, I've had amazing opportunities, not easy opportunities always, but amazing opportunities to lead, to help. And I'm entering a phase of my professional and personal career where I can really start to foster, look back at the trail that I and many, of my friends that did come back or stayed here have blazed as women leaders in rural Craig, America, and then look at who needs to be brought into that same trail blazing work. And so, Shannon, I know you reached out initially um, for Feminist Friday and kind of widening that circle. Could we all get on board and get together and connect virtually to build a network of women leaders throughout the entire, nation, really, not just our individual communities. And I'm so excited to let you know that we are working on that. And hopefully in a future podcast, I can announce exactly the progress of that work.
Awesome. Well, thank you for mentioning that. And I get tingles just listening to what you're talking about. And there's so many different things I've penciled down that I want to just circle back on. But the first, just so our viewers are aware, if you're not familiar with Feminist Friday, I started that almost a year ago now, as a really intentional way to make make connections in the feminist community. And when I say feminist, I mean female. I believe that feminists, feminism is not a bad word. We've, for some reason, gotten to the point where we think that to be a feminist, you have to be a man hater, and that is not the case. All of us came from a woman. We all have mothers. We should appreciate them. Happy Mother's Day to all the moms out there. That's coming up soon. But in the same token, we need to make sure that we're going to create a safe place where women feel like they can complain a little bit. They can find ways to kind of talk about the issues they're facing with culture, not necessarily the men in their life, but just the overall arching problems that women have. And we can't do that when there's guys around. So we created this female think tank, if for lack of a better word. We meet the last Friday of every month, most of the time at my home, because I wanted people to feel safe. It's never a real fancy party. We just do chips and salsa and a bottle of wine. And we do a different curriculum each month. And it's always the last Friday of the month from 6 to 9. And we have a curriculum that is based on the following principles, based on the curriculum topic. Those principles are enlightenment, empowerment, and edification. So it's just a way for us to, it's been a way for me to try out principles and finish my book. It's been a way for me to make friends that are about my same age, that we have similar things we're going through, and a support system. And so my second book that should be out in the fall, hopefully, all goes to plan, will be centered on Feminist Friday and how anyone in any community can take, and it's going to have a guidebook, basically how you can create a Feminist Friday in your own backyard, and what that looks like. And because I've got it down pat. I mean, I've learned a lot over this last few months, and well, gosh, it's good. It's something we need, and especially since COVID, since we're all kind of just isolated and lonely, and we have to start doing better. And a big part of my Feminist Friday walk has been motivated by my grandmother, who loved Craig, Colorado, and she moved there in the 40s and lived there for forever, 60 years, and she made her home there. And she was very, very integral in the community, and many of her female friends were as well. And they were each other's rocks. It was a village of people that cared. It was just beautiful. The integral things that she was able to create in that town because she cared about people.
Yeah, it's amazing. There's certainly, we talk about a little bit about the old men's network. There's certainly, and I wouldn't use the word old, but there's certainly a woman's network that I think has existed forever here. When I was recently asked about who are the leaders in Moffat County and Craig, Colorado, and I reflected a little bit and I started to think about, well, what is that definition of leader? If it's the people doing the work and the people who are really blazing those trails, they're all women.
They are.
Almost all of them. The people doing the things are women. Now, the appalling thing is we're not represented fully in areas of power. So boards of directors, volunteer boards, certainly not in elected office,
Mm-hmm.
and not even in the CEO offices, the C-suites of our local businesses. So that is a piece that we need to change. And one of the reasons I accepted your invitation and really haven't been able to attend as it turns out, but nevertheless, I like to follow the Facebook page and the chat and just cheer you on from afar. And part of it is because you don't know this about me, but I used to be teased mercilessly, especially by my younger brother, about, oh, Sasha the feminist. And it was thrown at me like a bad word. Like I should be dating and doing more and partying and all of these girly things and designing my wedding dress and all of these things. But again, my family wanted me to break the cycle. And part of this cycle was falling in love with love and then falling in love with the wrong person and having babies young and never being able to really get to a position of prosperity, being dependent all of the time. And they didn't really want that for me and my future. So breaking that cycle was important. And so, yes, I was a feminist very early on. When your Facebook group and the Feminist Fridays popped up, I have to now reference the title to your book. I did feel like I'd arrived, that finally
Oh,
the ideas and some of what I had been doing since I was a very, very small kid are finally resonating. And we're beginning to recognize that as women, uh, we can lean into the idea of feminism, and we can make it our own. And I think that's part of what this next wave of what I'm trying to do, you're trying to do, so many of us existing leaders are trying to do, and hoping that the emerging leaders will be able to benefit from and carry on and iterate on, is the idea that we are learning to own our power as women and not
mhm.
show up pretending to be men and trying to work and assimilate into that culture and that style. And so for us, that means sometimes we're messy.
Oh my
We are.
gosh. I think that our last conversation, you helped me write my last chapter because this is word for word my final pink feminist thoughts motivated by the Barbie movie. So yeah, I'm going to send you a book and I'm going to autograph it. It's just so much fun. It's so much fun.
Right?
There's this
Yeah.
wave, and you alluded to this. There is this wave in small town America and large town America and everywhere in between. And these women are starting to wake up and realize that we got it, and realize that we have the power, and we have the education, and we have the wherewithal. And I think that one thing that Feminist Friday is the tool. Okay, this is really important. It's hard to navigate the patriarchy in a respectful way where you can get your point across and you can get things done, right? What for me, I want to get things done in corporate America. I want to be able to take my business principles to any man, any woman, and have a conversation with them about what's going on in their organization and some ideals that I could potentially help them implement, right? So as we're navigating our world as women, as we're navigating our friendships, as we're letting people into our folds, are we doing that in ways, because time is finite. We don't have forever on this planet. So are we creating relationships with women that support us, two, accept us, and three, can help us launch into the next stage of our life, whatever that looks like for us. So that is really where Feminist Friday has its power and its usefulness, because we have all these things. We're good at what we do, but how do we communicate with those that are currently in power to infiltrate in little ways? And that's why I developed the PTO firm. That's just why I did it, because people are like, I don't want a woman telling me how to run my things. But really, it just starts with one step. It starts with one thing that we can implement and then grow, and then maybe crack the door open and let some other goodness in. And many times, Sasha, you know this, one thing can mean everything. So with that, what is the one thing that you're doing in Moffat County that is really, really providing impact to the community right now?
Sure. Well, and I'm going to come back to PTO Affirm and your business efforts because they are connected. Um, so I have a new opportunity. I did a lot of major pivots last year, and including became a serial entrepreneur, recognized myself as a businesswoman, determined that I could be successful without following a traditional career path. Those were all really groundbreaking for me, and they happened super, super fast. It was intense. And I am so happy to have accelerated through that process and be where I am now, which is newly minted economic development consultant. And that consultancy is built around addressing a very large transition in our community. So in January of 2020, I was pulled out of my college classroom where I was a dean of workforce education for our local community college, pulled out of that classroom. This is never done, by the way. Educators in the classroom, it's sort of precious and you just don't disturb them, right? So it was a big deal. Pulled out of the classroom. We rushed over to Tri-State Generation. It's a large coal-fired power generating station here in Moffat County, and where we heard with all of the employees that the corporation had decided to close the plant down by 2030. We all knew sort of theoretically that closure would happen one day because these sorts of industrial developments have a lifespan. And coal is a finite resource and it also had a sunset. But to get the exact date handed to you was a shock. To know that it was 10 years in the future was a small comfort for folks that really generationally have been pulling energy out of the hillsides. And uh, this goes back to probably even beyond records of folks recognizing that coal was here and that you could dig it up very easily. It lies close to the surface, and then you could heat your own family's dwelling, whether that was a pioneer home or perhaps a wiki up. But then you could also market it to your neighbor and your neighbor's neighbor. So at one point, there were over 30 what they called wagon mines in Northwest Colorado. And those eventually evolved to a major industrial complex. And part of that, we were actually pretty late to the coal party. And the reason we were incentivized to move forward very fast and to start to mine and produce coal on a large commercial scale is because the scientists deemed that the coal here was clean coal and that the more we'd burn our coal in Northwest Colorado, the less we'd have to burn dirty coal from elsewhere. And so we were being environmentally stewards of our environment, and that we were doing, our country and the world a favor by burning as much clean Northwest Colorado coal as possible. And that coal industry led to really good jobs in terms of high paying. Now we can talk about some of the less than great aspects of coal mine. It also incentivized the daily worker to not really think of financial planning and family benefits, and so you often had people where they suddenly bought big houses, lots of toys, overbuilt their lifestyle, and then they were dependent upon overtime. And with overtime came less attention and time to family needs and family matters. And so
Mhm.
a lot of substance abuse, a lot of domestic violence, a lot of friction in the community as well. And coal mining, by the way, whether it's at the surface or underground or whether you're a plant technician, all of it is very dangerous work as well. So, and male driven, which creates a band of brotherhood, and sometimes it creates frictions in a culture between men and women, between the coal is king and those who don't work in that industry directly. It creates a very interesting cultural mix. And
Mhm.
so in this present time from 2020 to now, we have been undergoing not just an economic transition, but a cultural transition. And it is uh, fundamental to underlying everything that we are experiencing here in Northwest Colorado. And I've recently been reflecting a lot on what does it mean to undergo a cultural transition? How do you reserve and preserve your identity, your pride, your strength and understanding of place and who and where you come from, while also looking at new ways of being in that place and new ways of creating prosperity? If it were just an economic issue, I think we could figure that out, dollars and cents and inflow, output, all of those things. But it
Mhm.
really isn't. It's cultural, it's social, it's emotional, it is also economic and community driven. And so your effort, my effort is systemic change for our economies and our communities. You and others are focusing on individuals. So when we look at an individual business or corporation, you are within that individual business network and system, and you're looking at cultural transformation within it, which affects and is fed. There's a biofeedback loop with the
For sure.
overarching systems, right?
And those feed into government,
Yes.
and they
Yes.
feed down to the individual and the
Exactly
children.
right.
Yeah.
Exactly right. It's in economic developer language, we call it an ecosystem. And
Yeah.
you might remember, I'm a science geek. I still have that in my background, and that's why I love data. Is that ecosystems have a lot of connections, and they've got these feedback loops. And so, what you do to transform a business can transform an individual's reality in life. That individual can then have a kick on to the community at large, and all of these things are feeding a regional ecosystem and a regional response. Um, and that work is very difficult. It's when you question culture, you're questioning power and authority. Who has it? Who might take it from you? There's a lot of, because we come from a sort of a place of struggle and a past uh, experience of struggle as a population. And again, many rural communities do. There's this initial like resistance towards help because we don't know what's their angle.
We're
Um,
afraid. We're
right?
proud. We're
We're
afraid when fear and pride are the two reasons people don't ask for help, especially men.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely, and we're not going to admit that we're fearful because that would undermine our pride. At any rate, and we understand that those cultural mores and tackling those cultural artifacts in order to help people move forward in their own way, in their own time, and for their version of what wealth and prosperity look like. And so that's exciting work. It's difficult work. I'm really excited, for folks like you because none of us can do it all, right? And so it's super exciting to connect with amazing, hopefully, women consultants. But I have favoritism there, but to get you in the door to help with those individual business cultural transformations, super important because that helps accelerate the work I can do in transforming regional economies.
Awesome. Yeah, it's a huge link, and I'm really glad. It in we I lay in bed at night and go, who can I have on? Who can I have on? And I think, gosh, I gotta have Sasha on, and this was why. This is why, and because we get it, we've done a little bit of work together as professionals over the past year, and we've had these conversations about how culture is such a big word and it's such an important word. And whether we're talking about organizational culture or a family's culture or a racist culture or a community's culture, right? A country's culture. They're all very, very much connected. And I kind of hacked it over the course of the last year. And I realized that the thing that we need to learn is empathy in order to impact culture. And what does that look like, right? Because I have when you read my book, there's a woman that I've been friends with for over a decade, and she's amazing. She's been involved with so many different cultures, trying to figure out religion and personal, interpersonal, and just all of this. She's like Yoda, quite frankly. She's quite amazing. Her name is Laura Lynn Jansen, and I always mention her on these SQV. She's kind of like a celebrity in my world. However, she just graduated with her PhD in humanizing philosophy. So as we talk about these things, people want snippets. They want small things that they can digest, that they can change their life. That's why, granola bars are so great, right? I don't have to think about it. I just unwrap it, put in my mouth, and I can keep going. So what can we do to package empathy in a way that makes sense to people? And for me, that was the PTO Affirm. I have other certifications I'm working through, but we have to make it, number one, recognizable. Number two, easy to implement. And number three, very effective, very fast. Otherwise, people are not going to believe in it, and they're not going to tell their friends about it. And, referrals are the best way to do that. So if we can, everybody packages things, and that's why they do it. It makes the pill a little easier, but just a little easier to swallow. So I appreciate you recognizing that culture is a very big thing, and you've got your hands full. We have a few more minutes, so I want to talk to you about some of the trips you've done recently and some of the work you're doing, putting hands and feet to this empathy concept.
Yeah, it starts with us, of course, and it can be really hard. I mean, I tell you what, Shannon, at the root of it, we're looking at a group of people, the coal mining folks, coal impacted workers, who are predominantly um, white men who
Mm-hmm.
earn a lot of money, who have a very good life. And advocating on behalf of a group that's relatively, well off, privileged, and it's fussy because their identities are being they're called on to make major changes. They get fussy, and it can be really exhausting and hard to be, advocating for folks in that space. And so I have to remember on a regular that empathy has to start with me. I have to find that human connection. I have to figure out how can I relate to this gentleman who's absolutely irate and furious and doesn't have my frame of reference. I've been able to travel the globe, go to a lot of different places. I I have some sense and understanding of perspective that when other transitions have occurred elsewhere and people lose their job, they don't have nearly the support. They rarely get the recognition. In my own case, I had to navigate very quickly choosing to exit higher education and figuring out private insurance and all of the things for myself and my family, and no support, no real support there. Whereas the coal transition community and workers are getting a huge amount of support, including my efforts, right? And they should, but so should other people in transition across the globe. And so, again, it's about recognizing, okay, this is an unusual situation. It is generational change. It is incredibly, difficult to go through. Start with empathy. When a minor is yelling at me, try to just take a deep breath, calm down, recognize where that's coming from, that, they feel a threat to who they are, what they have, what they can do for their family, and relate to them that way.
Mm-hmm.
Relate to each other first as human beings. And
Mm-hmm.
so that empathy and packaging that empathy for me in a daily practice where I am learning by doing and just completely, having to run. I used to say learning how to fly while flying the plane. No, we're actually machining the parts, learning how to build the plane, then learning as we learn how to fly while we're flying it. Like it's a lot. And so, that's at least the place I can start with, is just recognizing the humanity in each other, that folks have families, they have a backstory, they have lived experiences. I may not entirely relate, but they're another human being,
Yeah.
and I need to try to help and understand where they're coming from so that we can show up really well for each other. And that
Mhm.
super helpful. I think it does get us to a place where we can at least start to have really candid conversations. And I think that's also essential. And this goes to our shared legacy as journalists. I got to play in journalism for 3 years. So that was amazing and exciting. Whereas you were sort of training for quite a long time to be in journalism. So I was envious when I suddenly found myself being a journalist, of all of that training and background, and wish I'd hung out a little bit more with the
It's so fun. It's so
journalism class.
rewarding. It really
Yeah,
is.
yeah. But while I was doing that and storytelling, I really, I think that's where I learned how to quiet my own inner voice and truly
Mhm.
listen, to hear and to understand, and to realize that this might have been a fluff piece for me, and just a page filler, but for
Yeah.
that person who the story was about, they might put that on their wall or tuck it away in a cedar chest for the next generation. I mean, you never know how you are going to impact both positive and negative with these things that you put out in the world. And so I think that on whole, we have a better opportunity of a positive impact when we start with our own ability to be empathetic and to think of ourselves, think of other people in our world first
Mhm.
as human beings, and then second as the boss, or the challenging teen, or the angry coal miner, or the whatever they
Yeah.
might title that they might be wearing in that moment.
Yeah, you sum it up really well. And our grandparents knew this, and pastors know this. And I interviewed a pastor that lives in Memphis. He's a sweetheart. He's a friend of mine, and we had a SQV a couple months back, and he talked about breaking bread. Like, you got to make sure people's needs are met. That coal miner that's yelling at you might not have eaten yet today, and so you just need to make sure that people can take a deep breath and take a bite of food. And it's really amazing what happens when you break bread together. And my friend Laura Lynn calls that humanization. So when you do that fluff piece or that edification of someone that you really weren't sure, like, is this going to be a good story? But anytime you can talk to someone and you can see that they understand, and you can repeat what they said and say, I really like what you said about that because I feel the same way. There's this humanizing effect that goes back and forth. And that's the key to empathy. That's the key to moving forward with any collaboration. So that's a beautiful thing. And thank you for pointing it out. Would you please tell us what you're doing? Because I know you've got something cooking up. What is going on in Sasha Nelson world?
A lot, as always, as always. A skill that we don't often put on our resumes, and we probably should, is juggler. Um, so at the beginning of the year, I launched this economic development phase of my career, and but my first contract for Economic Catalyst is the Economic Recovery Corps Fellowship. So it was almost 8 months in process from when I think we first reconnected in person over the phone around June, July of last year, that I put in the application and then began an amazingly intense selection process. The Economic Recovery Corps is a federally funded backed program that is sponsored by the International Economic Development Council, IEDC. It is designed to be another corps, just like Peace Corps or AmeriCorps. The difference being that none of us are young college kids. We're all mid-level or higher career professionals, and we have been embedded. 65 of us were selected. 4% of those who applied, by the way. Yeah, it's
Congratulations.
pretty amazing. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I'm just blown away. I had some plan A, B, C, D, E, F, et cetera. And so I'm so glad I didn't have to execute any of those, but also just blown away that I'm in this first cohort. We're in 42 states in 65 communities across the nation. There are two of us here in Western Colorado, myself and Danny Van Winkle, who's a legacy rancher and a family rancher down in the Grand Junction area. And she's working on agricultural food systems, whereas I am working on industrial diversification. Should be no surprise. We're losing our largest industry. We need to rapidly create some options for folks and bring good jobs and great employers here. And so, if anybody out there is looking to grow or expand a business and is interested in checking us out, discovercraig.com is a great place to start. And soon we'll have a regional website to also share with folks. So, with that work, I spent the first 90 days in a lot of listening sessions, listening and learning. Where are each of the communities at? What do they need? What have they already done? Uh, 99 meetings in 90 days, Shannon. It was a lot. Also, 5 trips that were outside of the region. So I had our ERC fellow training in Portland, Oregon. Just before that, I was able to go to Washington, D.C. and represent our community. Last year, I was part of the Building Resilient Economies in Coal Communities project that is funded and supported by the National Association of Counties. We had a community challenge to take our existing community and regional plans and focus them on transition efforts and create implementation plans that we can carry forward into the future. And we were able to present a capstone in DC and really relate to folks in DC what the reality of rural transition communities is like. What could we do better, both groups, to engage and to make sure money is flowing and other resources are flowing back and forth. And I was told that our stories are really important because folks that are living in larger urban centers and or in DC don't always have a understanding of some of the real simple misconnections and how we can reconnect and do better, all of us. So that was super exciting. And then upcoming another trip to DC, a trip down to you in Tampa in July. Just I love travel, and so this is it's an amazing thing to be traveling in association with work life too. Learning as much as I can, as rapidly as I can about all manner of things, economic development, and I'm open to that learning and growth. And so I know you're building a huge network of people. Please reach out. If anything in my message is resonating with you, let's connect. That's how we help each other eat the elephant, make big things happen. Our little butterfly wings can rock the rest of the world. Sometimes we need a bunch of us flapping, and
Yeah.
we do that through connections, right?
It's so good. It's so very good. And I'm so excited to have this time with you and to find out what's happening in your world and for you to explain it in your own words. And it's so valuable. And I'm so proud of you, Sasha.
Right back at you, Shannon. And I've already flagged this, but I think we need to, have a 2.0 in about a year's time. Let's see what we've built together, and by together I mean all of our communities. So I genuinely want for folks listening to consider connecting. None of us can do it alone. And, I think it's time too that the silly divides, urban, rural, uh, women, men, that those aren't serving us very well anymore. So now, if not when now, there's just such an amazing ability to connect through this digital age and all of the tools at our fingertips, in person at times too. It's amazing. And so we can really take those systems that are no longer serving us and transform them. And that doesn't mean they have to be worse or that there needs to be winners and losers. Maybe that's really at the heart of this transformation, is a recognition that there's enough for people if we are careful stewards of that enough. If we are open to sharing and growing together and connecting as human beings, then we can tackle these big challenges and we can create systems that serve us all better.
Yeah. I'm blown away, and I'm so excited that you're doing the work you're doing, because they really need you. And I just want people to know that they can find you on LinkedIn, because people are going to want to connect with you, because I'm going to be sharing this with lots and lots of really high level people, and we want to make sure that you can find them. So Sasha is on LinkedIn, and it looks like, is it Sasha Therese Nelson?
Charisse.
It's pretty.
Thank you.
Your middle name. Everybody knows my middle name. Anyway, we can keep talking forever, but I know you have a hard stop, and I want to be respectful of your time. So let's do this again. Let's have a conversation just between the two of us. But I'm excited that we had a chance to kind of put all this in a package and put it out there for the world, because girlfriend, you're rocking it. I'm so proud of you.
Thanks, Shannon. Thanks to you as well. And all the lady leaders out there, thank you for what you're doing every day. And the men of our world too, or whatever you identify as, no judging here. I just want to say thank you for stepping up, for paying attention, for engaging. Let's stay connected.
Sounds good. All right. Thanks a lot, Sasha. Have a great one. Have a great weekend.